My name is Hannah Bronstein, and I'm in the elementary education program at NC State. The book that I chose to read for professional development purposes is called Other People's Children, Cultural Conflict in the Classroom by Lisa Delpete. I was first interested in this book based on an essay by Delpete called Skills and Other Dilemmas of a Progressive Black Educator, in which she reflects on her teacher preparation and contrasts it with her own education and her own cultural background. The book is a compilation of essays and anecdotal accounts from Delpete, and it addresses a wide range of topics, including but not limited to literacy instruction, dialect, communication, culture, stereotyping, racism, and academic studies that inform teaching theories. And so the main premise that I felt was present in the book was the examination of racism, multiculturalism, power, and privilege in education, specifically in teaching and teachers' education programs. And again, the book really does take on a lot of different issues under this wider umbrella of racism, power, and privilege in education. So it was hard to hone in on just a few main ideas because I think that you can examine the book with a lot of different issues in mind, but some of the main issues that I thought were present were what Delpy calls the culture of power. And in the book, this is defined in a couple of ways. First, she says that issues of power are enacted in classrooms, and I think this is a concept that most of us are familiar with, the power of the teacher over the students, the power of textbooks to determine what is being taught in the classroom, the power of the state in enforcing school as mandatory. But what Delpete adds is that being explicitly told the rules of the culture of power makes acquiring power easier. So, for example, when speaking about students who speak what is considered non-standard dialects of English, Delpy argues for explicit instruction in the conventions of standard English so that they can use these tools to be successful in academic contexts that consider standard English to be the norm. She also asserts that those with power are frequently least aware or least willing to acknowledge its existence, and she talks a lot about how the communication breaks down at that point between white educators and black educators. Moving on to part 2 of the book, Delpete has organized some reflections from her work in diverse communities in Papua New Guinea and Alaska. This quote is specifically about a situation in Native Alaskan communities where white educators were moving away from round-robin style reading to individual reading based on academic research. Meanwhile, in classrooms that had Native teachers, the children were reading in unison as a group because the Native teachers had a better understanding of their cultural values about collaboration and interaction. This portion of the book includes a lot of anecdotes about communities that had opinions on their children's education and the contrast between schools in which those opinions were considered or ignored, and the effect that that had on not only the community's perception of education and literacy, but also on the students' happiness, on their willingness to learn, and their willingness to go to school. It's a very interesting set of essays, but unfortunately not enough time to go through all of the issues presented in this portion. Next, Delpy speaks about connecting curriculum to experience. And this quote states, "The greatest asset in the student's possession, the greatest, moreover, that ever will be in his possession, is his own direct and personal experience." And she relates stories of teachers who are successfully relating the curriculum to the student's experience, either by incorporating aspects of their history into the history curriculum, or even simple solutions such as Delpete states that when she was a teacher, she would put students' names into the math problems so that the math problems were about students in the classroom. Or a Native Alaskan teacher who teaches the class to calculate distance by speaking about the village. So seemingly simple solutions to a large problem. And she talks a lot about the necessity for the teacher to know their students' culture, their background, their references, and what would be applicable to their lives and relevant. The last main idea that I wanted to talk about from the book is that of teacher education. Throughout the book, Delpete offers the direct statements from students and professionals, and they all express similar sentiments of frustration with racism in teacher education programs, with the lack of open and honest communication surrounding issues of race, and even the racism in academic studies that proclaim their own communities to be deficient or incapable of learning. Some suggestions for teaching: maintain awareness of variations in dialect, narrative styles, and attitudes of the populations represented in the classroom. At one point in the book, Delpete talks about how in white middle-class teachers it's common to prompt students to follow rules with questions, whereas some cultures may not understand this tendency and prefer direct statements. And the very next morning, a student approached me and told me that their pencil had broken, and I said to them, "Well, then what do you need to do?" Instead of saying, "Put the pencil in the red basket and get a new pencil from the green basket." And it made me reflect on my own inclinations and immediate reactions that come from my background and culture. Another suggestion for teaching would be to work to create a multicultural curricula that educates children to the differing perspectives of our diverse population. And within this, I think it would be necessary to interact with the culture and the community of the students that you're serving, and to listen and learn from their opinions as experts on their own children. To conclude the presentation on this book, I've included this quote: "To provide schooling for everyone's children that reflects liberal middle-class values and aspirations is to ensure the maintenance of the status quo, to ensure that power, the culture of power, remains in the hands of those who already have it." And I think, to me, what this means is that there can be no one-size-fits-all education, especially when it concerns different cultures, races, approaches, and also that there can be no apolitical approaches to education, especially when the society that we live in has such imbalances of power and privilege. To conclude, I would like to extend a recommendation to read the book. It was a little difficult to sum up in only 10 minutes since it does include such a range of essays on different issues within education. And Delpete is such an interesting writer, and has actually written a number of other books expanding even on the ideas in this original book. So I definitely recommend, if you have time, to read the book. It's very interesting, and it covers a lot of information that beginning teachers should definitely be aware about. Thank you.